welcome to another episode of Hoda's Career Info. Before we dive in, I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone who's been reaching out with your thoughtful messages and feedback. I love hearing from you. It reminds me why these career conversations are very valuable. We are joined today by Professor and author Dr. Emily Bullock Yowell. Stay tuned to hear her story and some valuable career tips. I am your host, Hoda Kilani, career and academic coach. Hoda's Career Info is about sharing words and stories from inspiring career people from across the globe. Use this program wisely and activate your career journey. Let's go!
Holland's theory became very popular, very well known. And I think in any field, any subdiscipline, the thing that becomes kind of the dominant also becomes the reaction point. As a psychologist who works within the career development field, I often get questions from other psychologists about like, oh, I didn't know that was a thing in psychology, like this career stuff. We need to better market ourselves as career development professionals, that the work we're doing is not solely about helping people get a paid job.
Thank you for joining Hoda's Career Info, your program where guests from across the globe share career tips and stories to help you successfully activate your career. Watch, listen, and learn. Remember to like, subscribe, share, and follow me, Hoda Kilani, on social media for more career info. Who is Dr. Emily Bullock Yowell? She is currently a professor at the University of Southern Mississippi in the School of Psychology. She is the training director of USM's APA Accredited Counseling Psychology PhD program and a licensed psychologist in the state of Mississippi. Dr. Emily teaches and supervises students at the undergraduate, master's, and doctoral levels. Her program of research and training focus is in vocational psychology and career development from a perspective that addresses the integration of practice, theory, and research. Dr. Yowell's work particularly focuses on the career development theories, Holland's RIASEC theory, and cognitive information processing theory. Her latest book, Holland's RIASEC Hexagon, A Paradigm for Life and Work Decisions, with co-author Bob Reardon, can be accessed for free. Thank you for joining Dr. Emily Bullock Yowell and myself for what promises to be an engaging career conversation. Welcome, Dr. Emily Bullock Yowell, to Hoda's Career Info. I truly appreciate your time that we're going to spend together and to learn more about you and your work. The first thing I want to ask you today, because in career development, we're all about building stories of our clients. Please share with the audience your story, and perhaps if you can embed you within it, any message you learned by living this story.
Okay, great. Well, Hoda, thanks for having me here, and I'm happy to share my story. I'll start with kind of the title logistics piece, which is that I'm a professor of psychology at the University of Southern Mississippi. But there was a story to get where I am today that I'm happy to share with you. I think for most people that story starts before they were even on this earth, right? So there are people that come before us, some I probably never knew or knew of, and some I knew well. I always think of my grandmother, my mother. They were both hardworking women. My grandmother in particular was not highly educated, but very focused on making sure she was contributing to society. And I just always work hard to remember that I'm standing on those shoulders, that just the things I've done would not have been possible if there were not people before me doing what they could do with their resources. And then my parents in my lifetime supporting me in education. And so I also like to acknowledge that not everyone has those things. I had these parents that would have done almost anything they could have done to make sure that I could pursue what I wanted to pursue. And whether that was emotional support or financial support, I had those things. And that is unique in this world and important to acknowledge when we get where we get. But kind of past that point of what came before me, certainly I was always, as a person who went on to get a PhD, I was always academically minded. That was really, I always enjoyed school. And I found fairly early on in my life that I did enjoy helping others. I enjoyed, probably even more so than that, trying to understand others, trying to figure out why people who could have very even similar backgrounds ended up being very different people with very different interests, pursuing very different things. And I kind of let that little path just sort of wove around in my life of always being fascinated with why people were doing what they were doing and wanting to learn more about that and understand how that can happen. Probably formally got introduced to the world of career development as an undergraduate college student. I was in a club that we had to volunteer for a certain number of hours, and one of the opportunities to volunteer was in the career center at the university, and I took advantage of that because I had always enjoyed like why people majored in what they majored in and all those sort of things, and that got me exposed to this field more formally. And I had already been considering going into a doctoral program in psychology. I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to focus on, but after seeing that work in action there in that career center, I started to find a focus of like, this seems to be meeting with kind of my intellectual interest of like, how do people get where they get? And I see people being helped really practically every day. I see people walking out with like a burden lift off their shoulders after just, a few minutes with a career counselor. So I really liked that, got really inspired by that. Eventually, kind of fast forwarding ahead, I started to look for doctoral programs and found a doctoral program that had the chance to focus in vocational psychology and career development at Florida State University. And I went on there where I just had amazing mentors, again, standing on the shoulders of people who still let me stand on their shoulders today in the work that I do. And so I went there, completed my PhD in counseling psychology, eventually obtained my current position as faculty at the University of Southern Mississippi, and moved up the ranks to professor. And I am also a training director of our doctoral program there. So I think that's the story in summary.
That's a very nice story, and I love how you threaded all these interests in your as you focused on what's next, you were threading your interest and reached a goal where it seems to me you're happy with what you're doing right now. With this story in mind, is there a message that you can share with the audience?
A couple of things served me well in being at a place where I'm really happy with my career, which is that I did try and engage the world. I tried to take advantage of the opportunities in front of me rather than doing like what had to be done, say to complete a degree or working in a part-time job, the things that had to happen. I tried to meet people, take advantage of opportunities. So I certainly that message. But kind of like you mentioned about my story, I think also, acknowledging those long-term interests. I have children 10 and 13 now, and I try to think about that all the time of like, what are they just loving now that they may forget when they're 17 and that I could remind them of when maybe they're less satisfied at 35 with something and might bring up some new ideas and directions.
Very, very cool. And if I were to take you back in time, do you remember when you started thinking about your career? Was it in high school or did you start earlier?
I think I was a strange child. And that I can remember very distinctly in around sixth grade, starting to notice that the field of psychology and the that I would read things, say like in just like magazine articles, and it would like cite a psychologist said this is how this works or this is, and I became fascinated from that point forward.
Thank you for taking this on. I know sometimes it's hard to think of these things when we go back in time. I appreciate you reflecting on that.
Sure.
My next question is about a term that best describes the work that you do today, and how would you define it so from your own perspective?
A term that describes the work I do today, and then how I would kind of say more about that.
I know
Um,
it's hard to narrow it down to one term, so but it's always a challenge I like to give guests.
it is hard to narrow it down to one term, but I think if I said one thing that the majority of my work can be captured in teaching. Now, my work includes kind of stereotypical teaching, right? I teach classes at the university, and so I do those things, but my other big role is research and more clinical training. And with research, all of my research involves teaching, involves including students at all of the university levels in that process. My clinical training, helping people learn to be counselors and psychologists, obviously involves a teaching component. So I think that that term fits.
And if I were to ask you, how would you define teaching? What does teaching mean to you?
A lot of it is, especially at the level I get to work, sharing, collaborating, and walking alongside someone as they develop in a skill set.
That's perfect. Thank you for taking this on. I know it's always a challenge because we do so much.
Yeah, yeah.
My next question to you, Dr. Emily, is about the book that is titled Holland's RIASEC, A Paradigm for Life and Work Decisions,
Mhm.
that you co-authored with Dr. Reardon.
Yeah.
Many career academics and professionals feel that the age of RIASEC has come and gone. So Holland's theory has come and gone. What do you have to say to them based on what you wrote in the book and your research you've done about it?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you asking the question in that way because I think that's the best place to start. And it really is a huge reason that we wrote the book. So I have used Holland's work in both my research and in the way I train folks for counseling and psychology all of my career. And Bob Reardon, he has as well, and his career spans a good bit more time than mine. And so, Bob Reardon was more of a contemporary of Holland's, and so I think he saw that what you just described in his career of Holland reaching his peak and then kind of becoming the theory and the research and the assessments that became the thing to say you were doing something better than that, right? And so Holland's theory became very popular, very well known. And I think in any field, any subdiscipline, the thing that becomes kind of the dominant also becomes the reaction point for anything new. And I think that's important. That's an important role that very popular and well-established approaches can play for us in our field to make sure that we are not staying complacent, that we are making sure that we're doing the best things for whoever it is we serve or whatever purpose we're reaching toward. This book gave us a chance to revisit that well-established, well-researched theory and explain the ways in which it can still be applicable to the things we do today. It's not an attempt to say newer things don't have their worth and their place and their way to extend some of this, but the idea that we needed to let go of it, I don't believe was valid. And I found throughout my career that was probably started post peak of Holland's theory that even though these new approaches, new intervention styles, new assessments were coming out and becoming more popular, I went to a lot of conferences, went to a lot of talks, read a lot of books, and despite the fact they talked about being new and different from Holland's theory, they always kind of went back to it. There was a point at which it was still used and needed. And so I think we needed to go back to the core, both the simplicity and the depth of the theory, to make sure we understood what we were still reacting to. I think a lot of people, most people, if you had any training in career counseling in school, got this, or in maybe an initial job, got some little snippet of it, or learned an assessment based in it. and it got oversimplified to just being labeling people, test and tell. And I think we needed to go back and revisit really what the theory had to offer us to make sure we were reacting to accuracy and could consider how it may still guide us in the work we do.
I am a fan of the RIASEC, so it's just for us to answer to people who are not. And if we're using it, I've seen it in the work with Ed Hidalgo
Mm.
and Dr. Rieger. Definitely worth checking out.
Mhm.
Who did you have in mind when you were writing this book?
We did have a broad audience in mind. I think we started inspired by what we just discussed, which is those that knew something about it, had probably used it at some point, but we thought might benefit from a renewed understanding. But I hope we also met the mission of speaking to those who had never heard of it, don't know anything about it, and may be seeing this for the first time, whether that's a person at the student level, practitioner, an instructor of others. At times, we also tried to consider what if this is an individual who's not in a paid helping role or a learning phase of their life, but maybe just seeking to better understand themselves or those around them or their children. And so we attempted to speak to multiple audiences. We attempted to write at a level that would allow multiple audiences to benefit from the information.
I did read the book, and definitely was easy to read, so easy to follow through and understand. So I will put a link to the book for the audience to check it out.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And it's a free book for those. I don't think we've said that, but we wrote this to not only be consumable by all in the literary sense, but in the financial sense as well. So we hope it's little stakes on the part of the reader to just check it out.
Definitely. And it was easy to access as well. Just clicked on the link and was able to access it. So
Great.
definitely recommend everyone checks it out.
Great. Thank you.
Emily, you were recently recognized by the National Career Development Association as an NCDA Fellow.
Mhm.
Can you tell us a little bit about what this recognition means?
Yes, thanks for asking. So, just last week, I returned from the National Career Development Association's international conference that was held in Atlanta, Georgia this year. And the recognition that you speak of is called the NCDA Fellow. And this requires a nomination process and it has a review committee. There's several criteria for the recognition, and that largely are kind of summarized in the idea of long-term contribution to the field, both through research and training. Because I, through my work, have the opportunity to do both of those things regularly, I was able to be qualified for the recognition. I have been a member and very actively involved in the National Career Development Association my entire career. And so it's just an honor to have the group that's such a professional home for me to recognize the work that I hope I add to the field. It allows me now as a fellow to collaborate and have access to some different groups at that association that help to mentor and guide the long-term mission of that organization.
Congratulations on this recognition, Dr. Emily.
Thank you.
I do have one more question. You have young people in your house,
Yeah.
and I work with young people, and I always advise them to continually step out of their comfort zone and to what we're calling today the stretch zone. What are some of the challenges, or one or two challenges that you're looking to take on now, or perhaps in the near future?
Yeah, I think that's such an interesting question. And I think initially hearing you say that, it makes me think about my professional work, right? I mean, it makes me think about my research and some of the new projects that we have on the horizon. So I'm going to talk about that first. But it also makes me, you started the question by saying, I have young people in my home. And it also makes me think about that my life, my world, my day is not navigated purely as a professional or as a professor, right? So I'm going to talk about that too, if that's okay. So kind of a dual answer.
Yeah, that would be perfect. The more
Yeah.
examples, the better.
Okay. So in my professional role, I am really excited about some new things we're doing to better connect career development and progress in career decision making to broader well-being and mental health. As a psychologist who works within the career development field, I often get questions from other psychologists about, like, oh, I didn't know that was a thing in psychology, like this career stuff. And I try to explain how it is all about the whole person. And there is so much of our life and our day and our week and our cognitive energy that's poured into what are we going to do for work, whether that's paid or unpaid or care, like all of that. And that impacts our well-being, that intersects with our mental health, that certainly impacts where we go, what we do, who we interact with. And we need to, better, I think, market ourselves as career development professionals, that the work we're doing is not solely about helping people get a paid job, but that it is impacting the well-being and the whole person. And so I think sometimes in my career, I've kind of lived in both camps. I've always trained psychologists in general clinical skills. I am a licensed psychologist in my state. And so it's kind of like I do this mental health thing and then I do this career thing. And I am challenging myself and stretching myself to make sure I'm every day talking about how they connect. I think I've always seen that and known that. And I want to be better about making sure that's being said and understood from both the training and research perspective. So those are sort of some ways I'm challenging myself right now in work. But I would hate to leave this talk without speaking about what my days and weeks really look like, which is not, I'm not just this professor sitting in an office or in a classroom doing professor things. I am chasing around. I'm married. I have a wonderful supportive husband who's a practicing psychologist. I have a 10-year-old boy, a 13-year-old boy. They're very busy. And my day is largely about figuring out where my attention goes and how to balance that, stereotypical work-life thing. It's very real. And I have gone through different phases so far in the last 13 years about how I do that and how I make that work. And I think that's also just so important to talk about. I also have, like, my parents just moved to the town where I live. I have aging parents who need my increasing attention. And those are all a part of our lives and have to be considered in the way we negotiate and navigate our careers. I have to, every time I make a decision about my work, my paid work, have to think about my unpaid work and where that may impact that decision. And I think, especially I think as women, we have to talk about that more often, about how we navigate those things, because it's not easy, but it's very rewarding.
And thinking of what you shared, what would be one tip or advice to juggle these things?
Yeah. One thing I've tried to get better about is acknowledging my family life in my work life, both with the people I train, so my students, acknowledging that more readily in my day to day, not complaining, not saying, oh, I have to also go do this, but just acknowledging that after I leave here, I may be going to a soccer game, or I may, be traveling this weekend with my family, or I couldn't be at this meeting, or I had to shift it today because I had a child that had to come home from school sick. And just acknowledging that those things are happening, like I said, both at my student level and at my professional level. I think when I was first a mother, I would almost, if my children disrupted my workday, I would almost try to hide it, like make sure nobody noticed. And now I think I'm in the opposite direction, which is make sure everybody knows that that's what's happening. So I think my tip is just being, as a person that trains folks and as psychologists and counselors, I'm always talking to them about be transparent with your clients. And I'm just trying to be more transparent and sincere in my work as well.
That's excellent advice. Thank you, Dr. Emily.
Mhm.
These were all the questions that I had prepared for you. Was there anything else we'd like to add or you wanted to speak about, but I didn't ask you about?
I think it did come to my mind, and the conversation or what I had to say just didn't end up going in this direction. But I think the final thing I would add is in our work, whatever it may be, I encourage us all to consider is what we're trying to do, accomplishing the goal. in our field of helping others, we can come up with some pretty amazing ideas and pretty complex concepts, but let's make sure it's really making a difference and helping the people that need help. I think so many times for folks like me that are in this academic realm, we can find something cool and intellectually stimulating. We need to make sure it's also helping people. I think that's one thought I had we didn't get to.
That's a perfect advice, especially when people say, oh, she's a researcher. That's all she does, gives us ideas, and then we have to implement them. Thank you so much, Dr. Emily, for your time today. I truly enjoyed our conversation.
Same. Thank you.
Well, that's it for today's episode of Hoda's Career Info, the program where career professionals from across the globe join me to empower you to succeed. Our guest today on Hoda's Career Info was Professor and author Dr. Emily Bullock Yowell. You can connect with Dr. Emily on LinkedIn. In this episode, Dr. Emily said something that really stuck with me. She said, in our work, whatever it may be, I encourage us all to consider, is what we are trying to do actually accomplishing the goal? That's such a powerful question, isn't it? It makes me pause and think, how engaged am I really in what I'm doing every day? Am I clear on the goals I set for myself? And is my work actually moving me toward them? Take a moment to reflect. In your job, in your studies, or in your projects, do you feel like you are truly accomplishing what you set out to do? Remember that you can watch Hoda's Career Info on YouTube or listen to the episode on your favorite podcast app. To let me know if you're interested in an opportunity to talk about your work, you can send me a direct message on my website, rightcareerfit.com, where you can also sign up for my newsletter to stay up to date on the latest episodes. And definitely keep sending those beautiful messages. Please like, subscribe, share, and follow me on social media. And together, let's increase career literacy. I'm your host, Hoda. Until next time, take the time to pause, recognize, and celebrate what you have achieved.